Hello and welcome to another video lesson. Today we're going to look at topic 2.4, Biomes, Zonation and Succession. We're going to examine an ecosystem that is both undergoing succession while it's also being held in artificial climax state through man's intervention, in this case through agriculture. All this links directly back to the main ideas in this topic. In fact, what we are going to do is look at this in a series of videos, not just one video. We're going to base this series in one particular habitat and use that habitat to elicit some understanding of firstly zonation, of why a particular habitat is existing where it does, how succession is affecting that habitat, and finally the link between succession and biodiversity. So, let's get started and put this into context. Our ecosystem today is found in the south of France, which is where I'm sitting, in particular along the Mediterranean coast. It is found on the edge of the Pyrenees mountains chain in a region called the Corbières. These are the hills and small mountains that lead from the coastal plain onto the high Pyrenees themselves. The Corbière range consists of a series of valleys that run from the coastal plain interspersed by some quite tall peaks, ridges and high plateaus. Some of the peaks are over 1,000 metres high. This area has been farmed since Roman times, and, as can be seen here, is a patchwork of fields and woodlands. However, that is not the full story. On the warmer south-facing slopes, a very specific vegetation type has developed. Locally it's called Garrigue and can be found throughout the Mediterranean region. So, what is Garrigue? Poulanin and Walters provide a broad definition. Garrigue is more or less open shrub community, usually about 50 centimetres high and rarely grown above 1 metre. The dominant dwarf shrubs are often widely spaced with a considerable amount of bare stony ground between the clumps of shrubs, which in the hot and very dry summers gives the vegetation a very parched appearance. Many species are aromatic and have small dry leathery leaves which often curl up in the summer, thus reducing transpiration loss. Some shrublets are chemically unpalatable to grazing animals, others are very spiny and are thus protected. Garrigue is very similar to the Chapparal vegetation found in parts of North America and forms an ecosystem that is often transitional between dry grassland and forest biomes. Garrigue is widely distributed in the Mediterranean, especially on these very dry stony slopes. Clearance for fuel and charcoal in the past, as well as grazing by livestock, particularly goats and cattle, as well as clearance for agricultural land, led to its development. As you can hear in this clip, strong summer winds are also characteristic of the Garrigue in the Corbière. Where valley sides are too steep for grazing or agriculture, a mixed evergreen and deciduous oak climax community forms. So, let's have a look at the distribution of Garrigue. Garrigue can be found from sea level up to an elevation of about 600 metres, though where conditions are favourable it can be found at higher altitudes. However, as already mentioned, where the land is too steep for grazing or agriculture, a mixed oak woodland develops. So we have some sort of picture of the distribution of the Garrigue in the Corbière. However, how does that relate to both biomes and zonation? So let's first of all take a look at the distribution of the deciduous oak. So we have a zone where the deciduous oak is distributed. That's the natural distribution of it, and this is forest biome. So this is the distribution area of the forest biome. However, what we haven't talked about is actually grassland biomes. And as we've already said, Garrigue is an intermediate, a transition between grassland and forest biomes. So in the Mediterranean, in this particular part of the Mediterranean, the natural grassland climax where it appears actually only appears to about 100 metres. Yeah, it doesn't actually go much beyond that. It starts to become slightly too moist, there's slightly too much precipitation, so trees develop instead of a grassland biome. So we have this area of grassland biome developing, and we have naturally a forest biome that would actually go from above this. And there is an overlap, as you can see there's overlap, and it's in this area of overlap where realistically the garrigue would naturally form. It's this area where there's transition between both forest and grassland, and that's the natural distributional zone of garrigue, which is a transitional zone between one biome, the forest biome found in the Mediterranean, and the grassland biome found in the Mediterranean. However, that's not entirely the full story, because what we actually have is a zone that the garrigue has taken up that actually extends further than that. It extends much further into the forest biome, basically through the influence of man, and it's man's influence that has actually allowed the grassland, the garrigue biome to actually extend further its farming. And that's what we're sort of going to look at a bit later. Why does the garrigue exist where it does? We know what the range of it is. We know that it fits as an intermediate zone now between biomes. But why does it actually exist where it does exist? And that's where we're sort of going to go next within this series of videos.